I didn't know the man wiping coffee off the marble floor would be the first person to truly see me. Not my title. Not my last name. Me. He was on his knees near the executive elevators, moving slowly, carefully, as if he had all the time in the world. A vice president had spilled his latte, laughed, and walked away. I stopped. I grabbed paper towels. When I handed them over, the man looked up at me with eyes that were far too sharp for a janitor. "Kind people don't need an audience," he said quietly. That sentence stayed with me. It stayed longer than it should have, longer than any compliment I'd ever received at work. And if you're listening right now, before this story goes any further, tell me where you're listening from. What city? What country? Because this didn't happen in a movie. It happened in my life. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I was a senior systems architect at North Shore Dynamics in Seattle, Washington. On paper, it sounded impressive. In reality, it meant I worked behind glass walls, while other people took bows. North Shore was preparing for the biggest deal in its history. A $10 billion partnership built on one thing: Aurora Grid. An artificial intelligence system capable of predicting supply chain failures before they happened. It reduced losses. It saved companies billions. Investors called it revolutionary. I called it mine. I didn't say that out loud. I never did. Because at North Shore, saying the truth out loud came with consequences. I had built Aurora Grid line by line over 4 years. Nights, weekends, holidays. I wrote the core architecture, trained the models, fixed failures no one else understood. When the system crashed at 3 a.m, my phone rang. When it worked flawlessly, someone else stood on stage. That someone was my younger half-brother, Ryan Carter. Ryan couldn't code his way out of a login screen, but he smiled well. He spoke confidently. He knew how to say synergy and vision without blinking. In interviews, he was introduced as the mind behind Aurora Grid, the prodigy, the future. Our father, Richard Carter, made sure of that. As the company's chief financial officer, he controlled budgets, bonuses, and silence. My stepmother, Linda Carter, ran human resources, culture, compliance, careers. Between the two of them, nothing moved without permission, including me. When I questioned timelines, I was told I wasn't a team player. When I raised security concerns, I was labeled overly emotional. When I asked why my name wasn't listed on the patent drafts, Linda smiled and said, "Leadership isn't about credit, Emily. It was about obedience." My name didn't appear in brochures. It wasn't on press releases. It wasn't on the legal documents being prepared for the Falcon Crest Group, the investors flying in for the $10 billion deal. I knew that because I had reviewed those documents myself. I wasn't erased by accident. I was edited out on purpose. Every day, I walked into a building covered in my ideas and felt invisible inside it. I fixed impossible bugs under impossible deadlines. I watched Ryan rehearse demos using slides I had designed. I listened to my father praise him in meetings while referring to me as support. Support doesn't build systems that carry billion-dollar valuations. Support doesn't get blamed when something goes wrong. That was the part no one said out loud. The first time I realized how deep this went was the night I stayed late to test a new deployment. The office was almost empty. The lights were dimmed. I stepped out to clear my head and saw the same janitor from earlier pushing his cart past the founder's portrait in the lobby. He stopped there, just stood and stared at it. "You work too hard for someone who doesn't get thanked," he said without turning around. I laughed because it was easier than asking how he knew. "You built something important," he continued. "Be careful who benefits from it." I watched him walk away, my chest tight for reasons I couldn't explain yet. At the time, I thought he was just perceptive. I didn't know he was warning me, because while I was staying late, fixing systems I loved, my own family was quietly preparing to make me disappear. I found out I was being erased on a Wednesday night, long after most of the office had gone dark. I wasn't looking for betrayal. I was reviewing a draft contract scheduled to go out to Falcon Crest Group the next morning, a routine check before the final investor demo. My job had taught me to read the fine print, especially when billions were involved. What I didn't expect was to see my life's work stripped of my name. Aurora Grid was there. Every component, every capability. The valuation language was glowing, but under intellectual contributors, the list ended with one name: Ryan Carter. I scrolled back up, then down again. I searched the document, once, twice, 3 times, nothing. No footnote, no acknowledgement, no clause protecting authorship. It was as if I had never existed. My hands went cold, not from shock, but from clarity. If that contract was signed, I would lose every legal right to Aurora Grid. No royalties, no ownership, no leverage. The system I had built would belong entirely to the company, and the company belonged to my family. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of servers I had personally configured. Somewhere between anger and disbelief, a quieter thought surfaced. This wasn't careless, it was deliberate. I stayed late that night, pretending to work while quietly pulling system logs. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. A small block of code had been added to the demo environment, buried deep enough to escape casual review. It was designed to activate during the live presentation, trigger a cascading failure, and log the breach under my credentials. My credentials. I opened the access history. The timestamp didn't match my activity. The insertion had happened after midnight, while I was at home. Whoever did it knew the system well enough to hide the trail, but not well enough to understand the architecture. The failure would look catastrophic, and it would point directly at me. I closed my laptop and sat there, breathing slowly, trying not to panic. Because panic is loud, and I needed to be quiet. The warning came the next morning. I was pouring coffee when Mr. Harris rolled his cart past my desk. He didn't stop this time. He didn't look at me. He simply said, "You might want to save copies of anything you care about. Servers forget things. People forget faster." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I understood. That afternoon, I began collecting evidence. I downloaded commit histories showing my authorship across 4 years of development. I saved internal emails where Ryan admitted, casually and without shame, that he didn't understand the core logic of Aurora Grid. I pulled security footage that showed my father, Richard, entering the server room late at night using an override badge he wasn't supposed to have. The hardest part was human resources. Linda had always been careful. Her files were clean on the surface, polished and compliant. But beneath that, there were revisions. Performance reviews edited after submission. Complaints quietly closed. Notes labeling me high risk and non-aligned, all dated shortly after I questioned ownership clauses months earlier. They weren't reacting. They were preparing. The final piece fell into place during a rehearsal meeting for the investor demo. Ryan was pacing, running through slides I had designed, his voice confident, his words hollow. "What happens if the system glitches?" someone asked. Ryan smiled. "It won't." "And if it does?" another executive pressed. Ryan glanced toward my father, then shrugged. "Emily's handling the back end. She's responsible for stability." That was it. The plan, spoken aloud without realizing it. If Aurora Grid failed, I would be blamed, fired, discredited, possibly charged with sabotage. And once I was gone, no one would question why my name wasn't on the contract. I left the room before they noticed my silence. That night, alone in my apartment, I laid everything out on my kitchen table. Documents, drives, screenshots, proof of authorship, proof of manipulation, proof that my own family had decided I was expendable. The realization didn't come with tears. It came with a hollow calm. They weren't doing this because they hated me. They were doing it because they needed someone to fall if the company was ever investigated. Someone credible, someone quiet, someone who had already been trained not to fight back. They had chosen me years ago. I looked at the evidence one last time, then backed it up in 3 separate places. As I closed my laptop, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Be ready," it read. "They move faster when they think you're cornered." I didn't ask who sent it. I already knew. The calendar invite arrived without emotion, which somehow made it worse. Culture alignment review. Mandatory, 90 minutes, executive conference room. I knew what it was the moment I read it. North Shore never used that phrase unless someone was about to be erased politely, with legal approval and a smile. When I walked into the room, my parents were already seated. My father sat at the head of the table, hands folded, composed in the way he reserved for earnings calls. Linda sat beside him, with a slim folder placed carefully in front of her, as if it were a gift. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing the expression he used when he expected applause. No one offered me a seat. I took one anyway. Linda opened the meeting. Her voice was soft, measured, practiced. "Emily, this is not disciplinary," she said. "This is about alignment, about what's best for everyone moving forward." She slid the folder across the table. Inside was a severance agreement, 3 months' pay, a clause stating I accepted responsibility for system instability risks, another clause that required my signature on a lifelong non-disclosure agreement. And then I saw the line that made my vision blur. Admission of fault. "You want me to confess to sabotaging my own work," I said, keeping my voice steady. Ryan sighed, as if I were being difficult on purpose. "Don't be dramatic. It's just language." My father finally spoke. "This protects the company. And you," he added, as if that mattered. I looked at all three of them, really looked, and felt something inside me settle. Not break, settle. "The technology is mine," I said. "Aurora Grid exists because I built it. And what you're doing right now is an attempt to steal it and bury me in the process." The room went quiet. Linda's smile tightened. "That kind of accusation is exactly why this meeting is necessary," she replied. "You've become volatile." "I've become inconvenient," I said. My father's tone hardened. "You're refusing to cooperate." "I'm refusing to lie." That was the moment everything changed. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Linda closed the folder. Ryan stood. "Then we have no choice," my father said. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Just like that. No hesitation, no regret. Linda slid another paper toward me, this one colder. A termination notice. A reminder of my obligations. A warning about legal consequences if I spoke publicly. "You'll hear from our attorneys if you cause disruption," she said. I walked out without another word. I didn't trust myself to speak. Security escorted me to my desk. I packed my things under watchful eyes, every step surreal. People avoided my gaze. A few looked sorry, none spoke. When I reached the elevator, my badge no longer worked. Outside, the air felt thinner than it should have. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the glass. For the first time in my adult life, I had no job, no title, and no protection. That's when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Emily Carter," the woman said. "My name is Olivia Grant. I'm a partner at Grant & Holloway. I represent you now, if you'll allow it." I laughed once, short and sharp. "I can't afford a firm like yours." "You don't need to," she replied. "Our services are being provided at no cost." I asked the only question that mattered. "Why?" There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "Because someone who still believes in this company asked us to step in," she said. "Someone who believes you're telling the truth." An address followed. A time. That same evening. I arrived expecting a conference room. What I found was a quiet office with a familiar janitor's cart parked neatly by the wall. Mr. Harris stood when I entered. Except he didn't look like a janitor anymore. He moved with certainty now, his posture straighter, his presence undeniable. He extended his hand. "My real name is William Anderson," he said. "I founded North Shore Dynamics 32 years ago." The room tilted. He explained everything calmly, methodically. How my family had declared him unfit using falsified medical reports. How control had been transferred while he was isolated. How he chose to disappear rather than fight blind. "So I stayed," he said, quietly, watching. He looked at me with the same sharp eyes I'd noticed weeks earlier. "And you were the only one who never forgot why the company existed." I sank into the chair, the weight of the day finally catching up to me. "For the record," he added gently, "you didn't fall today." I met his gaze. "You were pushed." And for the first time since I'd walked out of that building, I realized I wasn't alone. The day the contract was scheduled to be signed, the building felt different. Not louder, not busier. Quieter in a way that made every footstep echo. Executives moved through the halls with rehearsed smiles, lawyers whispered into headsets, and the Falcon Crest delegation waited upstairs, unaware that the ground beneath the deal was already shifting. I was not supposed to be there. My badge had been deactivated, my access revoked. Officially, I no longer existed inside North Shore Dynamics. But I walked in anyway, escorted not by security, but by William Anderson himself. When the board meeting began, my father was already presenting charts, projections, confidence. He spoke about Aurora Grid as if it had always been Ryan's vision, as if the system had simply appeared one day fully formed. William waited until the final slide. Then he stood. "I'm invoking founder authority," he said calmly, "effective immediately." The room froze. He placed a folder on the table and began, not with accusations, but with facts. Forged medical reports, unauthorized financial transfers, manipulated HR files, video footage of Richard entering restricted server rooms, email chains outlining the contingency plan if regulators ever came knocking. My father's face drained of color. Linda tried to speak, then stopped when the screen behind William lit up with evidence she could not explain away. Ryan laughed once, nervously, until the laughter died in his throat. William turned to the board. This company was built on innovation and integrity. Both were compromised. Then he looked at me. "I'm reinstating Emily Carter," he said, "and appointing her interim CEO, effective now." There was no applause, just silence, the kind that comes when power changes hands and everyone feels it at once. Richard, Linda, and Ryan were escorted out pending investigation. The deal was paused. The room emptied slowly, as if no one quite trusted the floor beneath them yet. I thought that was the climax. I was wrong. That night, North Shore hosted the Gala. The rooftop glowed above Seattle, glass and light stretching toward the dark sky. Investors sipped champagne. Journalists murmured. The Falcon Crest executives returned, curious, cautious, waiting to see who truly stood at the helm. I stood near the edge, breathing in the cold air, reminding myself that I was still standing. That's when I heard shouting. My family stormed in, uninvited and unhinged. Linda moved first, her composure shattered, her voice sharp enough to cut through the music. "You think this is over?" she hissed as she reached me. "You're nothing without us." Before I could respond, her hand struck my face. The sound was loud, final. The entire rooftop went silent. I didn't move. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't react. I waited. Then footsteps approached. The head of security stepped between us, his back to my family. He straightened, turned toward me, and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Madame CEO!" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Screens around the terrace came alive. Footage played. Emails, contracts, the sabotage code, the plan to frame me if the demo failed, the fraudulent clause hidden in the Falcon Crest agreement. My father tried to speak. His voice cracked. He said my name like a plea. No one listened. I walked to the stage, my face still burning, my hands steady. I addressed the investors directly, explained the truth without drama, and then picked up the pen. I struck through the fraudulent clause. Then I signed. The $10 billion deal was sealed, clean and transparent. Applause finally broke out, hesitant at first, then undeniable. Behind me, handcuffs clicked shut. As security led my family away, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not triumph, not revenge. Relief. Later, when the crowd thinned and the city lights reflected off the glass, I stood alone at the edge of the rooftop. For years, I had been a shadow inside my own work. A tool, a backup plan. Someone chosen to fall quietly if things went wrong. That night, I chose something else. If you stayed with me from the beginning to the end of this story, tell me what you felt. Did it move you? Did it surprise you? What kind of stories should I share next? If you enjoyed this one, please like and subscribe to hear more real stories from women who refuse to stay silent.